Today, as we start a brand new series. We're so glad that you're here, and we have a number of visitors. I'm glad that you guys are here too. I hope you're made to feel welcome. This series is going to actually lead all the way up until Easter, and it's a great lead-in to that very special day. But today, as we get started, I wanted to look at a passage that very well could have been in the last series that we did. If you haven't noticed, the last series, and this last week I ended up with a parable, and this week we're starting to talk about the parables. And there was a verse I didn't use in the last series, but it certainly could have been there. It's in 1 Peter chapter 2. It says this. It says, "For God has called you to do good, even if that means suffering." God has called you to do good, even if it costs you, even if it's a sacrifice, just as Christ suffered for you. He is your example, and you must follow in his steps. And as we discussed in that last series, all of us, every single one of us, has been called to do something with whatever it is that God has blessed us with, and to follow the example of Christ. That's what it says right here. And Christ, who said over and over and over again, he said, "I didn't come here to be served, but I came here to" what? Somebody help me out. To serve others, right? And it's one of the reasons why Christianity, I think, is if it's done right, it will cost you something, because Jesus said, "I didn't come here to just be served. I came here to serve others." And we all understand that we're called to serve. So this message is about that too. But it's really centered around a parable, a specific parable that Jesus shared. And our new series is about the parables that Jesus told. And I'll tell you, I love teaching about the parables. I really do, because every time I study the parables, it doesn't matter how many times I've read them, how many times I've gone through them, I always see something new. I always learn something. There's a real quality to them that does that. So for the next several weeks, we're going to be looking at the things that Jesus said in these little power-packed stories, the stories that he used when he would communicate, when he would talk with people about God and about the kingdom of God. He always used these stories. And if you read the Gospels, one of the things that you'll notice is that he had this really unique ability to communicate and connect with people all over the place. He did it with people from every walk of life, from every socioeconomic group or racial group. It didn't matter. Jesus had a way of communicating and connecting with people that was very, very special. He was, in fact, a master storyteller and a great communicator. But if you haven't noticed, as human beings, over time, the way that we communicate has changed a great deal, has it not? I mean, it's much different now than it was years ago. As people, we've gone from communicating by going over to somebody's house and actually talking to them, to meet and talk with each other face to face. What an antiquated method of communication that must have been, right? But we went from that to writing letters, and we would send letters. And over great distances, you could communicate with people, and that was seen as an advancement in communication. How many of you guys remember mailing letters? How many of you guys still mail letters? A few, yeah. It's still a form of communication. A lot of us do that, but most of us now, we've gone from mail to email, or phone calls, or text messages even. And for a lot of people, this is their primary means of communication. Just digital letters back and forth and that kind of thing. But we have to add to it now social media, because there are all ways to communicate using the internet: Facebook, Messenger, Twitter. How many of you guys tweet? How many of you guys are Twitter people? A few people. Okay, if you don't know, though, Twitter, it's a way to broadcast what's going on in your life in a very short statement, like 280 characters or less. You could type this in one time, and you send it out to all of your friends or all your followers, and they get updates on your life. But honestly, all of those things, they may be fast, they may be quick, they may be efficient, but they will never take the place of actually talking to people. There's something unique that happens when you're face-to-face with people and you're communicating. Those other kinds of communication, they may be fast, but they are unfulfilling as a relational tool. How many of you guys have ever sent a message and you're telling a joke and the other person didn't even get it, that it's a joke? And maybe they got offended, right? Because you can't read facial expressions through text messages. You just really can't. But having said all that, I think Jesus would have been great on Twitter. I think Jesus could have communicated a lot on Twitter, because Jesus, at times, he showed that you can say more by saying less. And so he really was the king of brevity. And he had these little power-packed stories, these parables. And Jesus showed us that you don't have to take a long time to say something. Now, you guys might hear me saying that this morning, and your heart just leapt, because you think, well, does that mean that church is going to get out early and you're not going to? No, that's not what that means at all. I'm not Jesus, right? But you cannot dispute the fact that Jesus had a way of communicating with the fewest amount of words necessary, and they went right to the heart. It was amazing. Jesus really set the standard for how to reach into somebody and connect with them in an amazing way. He was a master storyteller. He could say more in fewer words than anybody. And I mean, the parables, if you look at them, if you just read a few, and there's like 39 parables, most of them are very short. Some of them are only one or two sentences, and yet the meaning is so deep and so rich. But they were all packed with truth. Every single one of the parables are packed with truth. And you can spend a lot of time looking at them and studying them and reading about them. It's fascinating to me that Jesus could take these little everyday stories that had one meaning, but then there was actually a deeper meaning to them. And so we're going to talk about that. And every single parable or every single story that Jesus told had multiple layers of truth. So they're very simple on the surface, but they have some deep truth underneath, and it's complex and even very deep spiritually. So we're going to talk about this. The Bible tells us that Jesus never taught without using parables. This is how important this was to him. When he would sit down with people or with a crowd of people, he never taught about God or the kingdom of God without using parables. And he was the ultimate storyteller. So we're going to start to unpack some of these truths. We're going to look at 4, and there are a lot. I had to pick out 4 to lead us up to Easter. But we're going to connect the dots between these stories that Jesus told and our stories and how those things actually come together. We're going to see that even though these were told, a lot of these stories were told thousands of years ago, they still have deep meaning for our lives today. Now, back when I was a kid and I was growing up, we didn't have a lot of the electronic games that we have now. We did board games. How many of you guys played board games when you were a kid? Okay, so I'm growing up, and one of my mom's favorite games was this game called the Game. How many of you guys have played the Game? You're not missing anything, okay? You're really not missing anything at all. Let me tell you what, I love my mom, but I did not love this game. It was a lousy, boring, especially when you're a kid, it's a boring game. We used to say it takes the F out of fun. That's why they call it the Game, because there's no fun in it, right? And really it's because there was no competition. As a kid, you want to win, but nobody wins. It even says on the box, everybody wins, right? So there's no ultimate winner. Not like you pass go and get $200 and you add it up at the end and you got more points than everybody else. There's nothing like that. You're not declared a winner. It was really just a set of cards. And the cards were written in such a way that they were designed to draw you into a conversation. And as a kid, that's not fun at all. Who wants to do that? I want to win, right? So there'd be questions. So questions would be like, if you were an animal, what animal would you be and why, right? And so I didn't want to play, and it wasn't fun, but I'd kind of make a half-hearted attempt because I love my mom, right? And I'd say, well, I guess I would be a cheetah so I could run away from this no-fun game faster than anybody, That's kind of how I looked at it. But even with that, there was one card in there. There was one question. It would come up from time to time, and I really, really loved it. The question was, it made me think about it a lot. The question was, if you were given $1 million, what would you do with it? What would you do with $1 million? Now, keep in mind, this was back in the 70s when $1 million was a lot of money. Okay, it's not as much anymore, but this was a lot of money. And the reason I love that question is because it allows you to dream. It allows you to kind of think, wow, what would I do if I had this kind of money? Would I buy a house or a boat or go on a vacation or whatever? For what it's worth, if I had $1 million today, I would start a noodle and company franchise here in Elizabeth City because I love that place. I can make myself rich eating there, and it's great stuff. But seriously, what a problem to have. Have you ever thought this through? What would you do if all of a sudden you had $1 million at your disposal? What would you do with that kind of money? Well, interestingly, there are 3 guys in a story that Jesus tells, and they're kind of put into this situation, this very situation. Today we're going to look at Matthew chapter 25. You have your Bibles. It's going to be on the screen too. It's called the Parable of the Talents. And these 3 guys, they have this wonderful dilemma of an infusion of cash that they have available to them and a chance to answer this question. What would you do if you had $1 million, right? And this parable is pretty short. It's not 280 characters, but it's not really, really long. It's just a couple hundred words, really. And Jesus is in this. He's trying to describe how God works, how the economy of God works, and it's different than our economy. For context, he had just now told another parable, the parable of the 10 bridesmaids. And then he goes on to say this one. This is in Matthew chapter 25, starting in verse 14. It says this. Jesus says, again, it will be like a man going on a journey who called his servants and he entrusted his property to them. To one he gave 5 talents. To another he gave 2 talents. And to the other he gave just 1 talent. Each according to their ability. He had judged their ability. He knew what they could handle, and each one according to their abilities, and then he went on his journey. Now, the Greek word here for talent, just so you know, because they didn't use the same money system we did, it was a certain measure of wealth. In most contexts, it's a certain measure of wealth. In fact, a lot of translations, maybe the translation you're looking at right now, it calls it bags of money or bags of silver or bags of gold. And if you do the research, what you will find is that one talent was worth about, in the Roman world, about 600 denarii, about 1 day's pay, and not like a lousy day's pay. This was a good worker, a good skilled worker, not minimum wage at all. It was a respectable wage for a day's labor. So if you do the math, one talent is about 6,000 days wages, or 15 years of wages. Scholars, a lot of scholars like to speculate, but the amount today would be like, one talent would be about $1 million. You can think about 15 years wages at a decent wage, about $1 million. And I don't know about you guys, but I used to feel sorry for the one poor guy that only got one. Like one got 5, one got 2, and this poor slob, he just got 1. But before you feel too bad for him, realize it's $1 million, okay? It's an enormous amount of money, this one talent. And I would be happy to be the guy who got $1 million to work with and invest in that kind of thing. But anyways, they're placed in this situation of answering that question. They're given this huge financial investment fund from this guy that they work for, and then he went away, and we can see by their lives and their actions exactly how they answered this question. What would you do if all of a sudden you had $1 million? The story continues. The man who had received 5 talents, he went out at once and he put his money to work. He invested it, right? And he was good at it, because as he did this, he gained 5 more. He increased it 100%. Pretty good return, right? This guy's pretty sharp. He did good. So also the one with 2 talents, he did the same thing. He went out and he put it to work right away, and he gained 100%. He gained 2 more. But the guy who had received the 1 talent, he went off and dug a hole in the ground, and he hid his master's money in the hole. So you've been entrusted with like $1 million, and what are you going to do with it? 2 of them, they say, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to like do these things here. I'm going to take my skill and I'm going to increase this, and what has been entrusted to me, I want to show that I can be trusted. But here's what one guy is thinking. I know what I'll do. I'll get a shovel. I'll go out in the backyard. I'm going to dig a hole, and I'm going to put the money there and bury it and just wait. I mean, are you serious? I'm not a financial guy. I'm not really a guy that knows how to do with money, you know. But if your plan is to dig a hole and put the money in a hole and bury it, you've got issues. This is not what normal people do, but you're in trouble, okay? In verse 18, it says this: after a long time, a while, the master came back to those servants, and he was going to settle the accounts with them. He wanted to know how they had done. And I heard someone sort of convert this into a modern-day parable, like one pastor I listened to years ago. He said it was kind of like winning the lottery. But it's really different than winning. You know, when you win the lottery, you can do whatever you want with it. You can go out and blow it all in Vegas. You can, there's no string attached. You can do whatever you want with it. You can be stupid with it if you want to, and most people are. I don't know if you've read the research. Most people who win the lottery, they end up in a worse place financially 5 years later than they were before they won the lottery, because they don't know how to handle that kind of money. But when you win the lottery, you have the freedom to choose what you're going to do with this, and there's nobody to answer to. You're not accountable because it's just the lottery. So you can go into debt and all these crazy kind of things. But I would relate this story more to the idea of a grant. Like a grant has a specific purpose. A grant, they will give you money to do something, but there's some expectation that there will be some kind of return here, right? Some accountability anyways for this. You're supposed to do something with this. And we've been talking about this over and over and over again during the last series. We're all called to do something. We are appointed and selected by God and entrusted by God with certain gifts, talents, abilities, and resources. And God expects us to do something. Different things for different people, but God expects you to do something. We're supposed to do something with the investment that God has given to us based on our abilities. That's what this story is saying. Something with a purpose, something, multiply it into a blessing. We can't just go and blow the blessing that we've been given. You're supposed to use it for a good purpose, not just for yourself. And the idea that you would risk it even, because these guys did, they risked it in certain situations to make a profit, to actually increase it. So you use your creativity and your talents and your skills to make something better. And it's kind of a simple tweak on our thinking that it will drastically change the way you live your lives. If you begin to look at and understand that everything that you have, your gifts, your talents, your abilities, your resources, your connections, everything that you have, they're given to you not just for yourself, but they're given to you so that you can accomplish something. So that something in life, you'll have something to show for what you have done in life. And your talents and your gifts, they're just not your own. They're on loan. You could basically say they're on loan from God. And someday there will be a reckoning. Do you guys understand that your talents are not your own? Just like these guys here, the talents that they were working with were not theirs. It was given to them, but it was given to them with certain expectations that there was going to be something. So first we need to acknowledge that our talents, our gifts, our abilities, they're not just our own. They're not just for us. It's okay, we learned in the last series, if you enjoy life the way that God has blessed you, and it's okay that you have things and you have resources. There's nothing wrong with that, but God does expect you to use them for his kingdom. And it's not so much about what you have, it's what you do with what you have that really matters the most. So if you're thinking, I don't have much to give, you have something to give. Every single one of us does. And it's not just, it's not semantics, because there's a difference. One implies ownership and one implies stewardship. And this is a parable about stewardship. How do you use what God has given you? So we all understand that we are a steward of what God has given us, and our talents, whatever they are, they have been entrusted to us. And God wants us to do something with them. 1 Peter chapter 4 says this, each one of you, and this is God speaking directly to you, each one of you has received a gift to use to serve others. Be good servants of God with the various gifts of grace that he has given you. Everybody has a part they can play. There's nobody who can say, I can't do anything, because everybody has something that God has given them. Now, in this parable, the word talent denotes something of weighted value or money value. That's one translation. But you can also, if you look it up in the Bible dictionary, you look it up just in the dictionary, you also see that it relates to an English word, ability or talent or skill or gift or something. We all have, if it's not resources, we all have something within us that we can bless other people with. Whether it's, baking or fixing or doing, whatever it is, all of us have various gifts, and we can use those and manage them somehow so that it brings glory to God. It is the idea that the talent in this parable means that the talents, abilities, and resources, they, like I said, they've all been entrusted by God, and we have to use them somehow, all of them. And you need to be aware of the fact, and it's kind of scary to think about it, but in this parable, just like in our lives, there is an accounting. There is a reckoning that will take place. Our management of what we have been entrusted with will be evaluated, just as these guys. That's what Jesus was trying to get them to understand. That at some point, he's going to ask you, what did you do with your life? No matter what part, in the grand scheme of things, large or small, our faithfulness with what God has given us will be evaluated. And in that way, life, we live our lives in such a way that we understand that God is going to expect something here. And we can't nobody's in for a free ride, right? Everybody has some part to play. In verse 20, it says, the man who had received the 5 talents brought the other 5, and he said, Master, you entrusted me with 5 talents. See here, I have gained 5 more. His master said to him, well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful with a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Come and share in your master's happiness. The man who had just had the 2 talents, he also came to the master and he said, you entrusted me with these 2 talents. Look, I have gained 2 more. His master said the exact same thing. He said, well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful with a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Come and share in your master's happiness. If you've ever wondered, if you go hang around church long enough, you'll hear this phrase, faithful in little, faithful in much. Who's ever heard that? Okay, a lot of you guys. This is where that comes from. This is exactly where that phrase comes from. We see this idea that if you have a dream, if you have some great aspiration, it's going to start small. It always starts small. You're first called to do some little things faithfully. God doesn't expect you to jump right out of an airplane or something. There's going to be a step to it. There's going to be a process that works you up to it. Every success story, if you read about them, had small beginnings, right? I mean, if you talk to the president and the vice president of any big company, most likely they will tell you a story of very small, very humble beginnings. I was a clerk. I was a stock boy. I started in the mailroom or whatever, and it led to success because I was faithful in the job they gave me. I got promoted, and I got promoted into greater and greater things. I remember when I first really surrendered my life to God. And it took me a while to do that. I did not become a truly devoted Christian until I was an adult, well into my adult life. And my first real ministry job, first paying ministry gig, I'll tell you what, it did not include becoming a pastor the very next day. It didn't include standing up and teaching people the Word of God. It really took years to get to that. My first job, like my first real paying ministry job, was working in a very small church in a community center. And so it was a shared facility. So what that meant is that on Saturday, somebody had to come in and set the chairs up and do that kind of thing and set all the coffee stuff up. Every single week I would do it by myself, or I'd drag my kids. They remember I dragged my kids and I'd make them help sweep the floors and mop the floors and stuff. And as an added bonus, I got to clean the bathrooms. I did. That was one of my jobs, right? I mopped the floor and I cleaned the bathroom. Nothing wrong with that. Absolutely nothing wrong with that. In fact, I'll still do that from time to time. If it needs to be cleaned, I'll clean it. I'm not good at it. My wife will tell you I'm not very good at cleaning, but I don't have a special ability or anything like that. But I will do that. And as I look back on that, what I know is I did the best I could. I really did the best I could in that ministry job, and that small thing. It was a small thing, but that experience of doing it and doing it well led to the place where I am now, which I find more satisfying, but it took a while to get there. I didn't just start out teaching from a pulpit. So doing the few things that God has put on my plate that I could take care of, and then that directly led to more and more opportunities. That's exactly how it worked, and it's exactly how it always works. And I think we should be encouraged by that, because wherever you are, the promise right here, and don't forget that there is a promise right here, that if you are in a place or you're in a job or you're doing something and you're just a little bit frustrated, you're not where you want to be, if you'll just do the things that you're supposed to do and do them faithfully and do them as unto the Lord, God will open up other opportunities to you. And he brings these opportunities into our lives that you can't even see coming down the road. You may be thinking, I don't know how I'm ever going to get there. And then all of a sudden a door will open and you will be blessed by God because you were faithful in the little things. God can trust you with a larger capacity as your capacity grows. And I still try to grow, and I still try to learn, and I still go to conferences, and I still read books, and I want to be better at what I do. But it all starts with being faithful in the things that I'm doing right now. Do a few things well. God blesses, and then clearly states right here that if you will use your gift, talents, and abilities in a responsible way, he will open opportunities for you to be even a further blessing, and you're going to be evaluated. Reading on as we finish out this parable. Then the man who had received the 1 talent came, and he said, Master, I know that you are a hard man, harvesting where you have not sown and gathering where you have not scattered seed. And he says, so I was afraid. When you gave me that talent, I was afraid, so I went out and I hid your talent in the ground, which, by the way, was actually something that people did in this day and age. They didn't have banks. They wanted to keep their money secure. This is actually, people did this. This is how they kept their wealth. And he said, see, I've dug it up. See, here is what belongs to you. And that's just sad, isn't it? He didn't blow it. He didn't lose the money, but he did nothing with it. And how many of us, we have certain gifts, talents, or abilities, or resources, and we don't know how to use them, and so we do nothing. You may think, well, the things that I can do, Robert, they don't count at church. I bet you they can. I bet you somehow anything you have a special gift for, special talent or ability, can be used to bless other people. And it doesn't have to be in the church building on Sunday morning. But whatever you have, you can use that to bless others. And I remember when I was young, I used to criticize the church for not doing what it should. As a young Christian person, I went to a church, and the fact is, we are the church, right? We come together and say, we are the church, and we're not just coming here to talk. We're actually supposed to be doing something, and God has trusted you and empowered you and called you to step up and be the answer to somebody's prayer. And you can do that. And I think back a number of years ago when I was in a place of frustration, my wife and I were going to a church, and I don't know why we stayed there. We really didn't like it there, but we were there for 10 years, wishing that they would do more, that they would progress and move further, but they never did. And I would criticize them. And in my prayers, I would actually express that to God. God, why is this church so lame? Why are they not doing this? Why are they not doing that? And finally it hit me that I was actually perpetuating the situation because I was coming to church and doing nothing. I was just waiting for them to get their act together the whole time. I was accusing the church of what I actually was doing. I was setting on my gifts, talents, and abilities, not using them in any way because I felt like they weren't worthy of my gift, talents, and abilities because they were lame. But it was, it was the same thing. I had a good excuse though. I remember at the time I had a good excuse. I was going to college. I was working jobs. I had family obligations, all these things, gym workouts, all kinds of things going on. So I had great excuses. How many of you guys have some great excuses? Right? We come up with these. We tell ourselves the reason I can't do more is because I don't have enough time. The reality is, all of us, we have these great reasons for why we can't be involved and why we can't be part of the ministry and why we can't step up and serve more. But God sees where we are, and he sees the busyness of our lives, and he still says, come on, rise up, serve. You are the hands and feet of Christ. You need to be doing the things. Stop making excuses and focus on what's really, really important. With the time that you have, this is your opportunity. Go make it count. And you need to go for it because at some point, our lives come to an end. And you may get to some point and think all the things you wish you had done, and you're going to be filled with regrets, and God doesn't want that. And I don't want you to have that. But this guy, he was afraid to step out and commit. That's basically what he says here. And he made excuses. He said, it's not my fault. I know that you require a lot. I know that there's going to be this accounting. The interesting part is that the master believed in him more than he believed in him. Right? The master had faith in him because at the beginning of the story, it says that the master allotted these investments based on their abilities. God had already judged him capable, but for some reason, he thought he was not capable. How strange is that? God actually believed in him more than he believed in himself. The master felt like this guy could handle it. And he had faith in his abilities right from the very start that he would be able to do something with it. He entrusted him with $1 million. I mean, it's true that the servant seemed kind of timid, and maybe he didn't know exactly, he wasn't as capable as the one that got 5 or the one that got 2, but the master sees something in him. He knows who he is, and he trusts him. He's already analyzed and assessed this guy and decided, yeah, this guy can actually do it. Not only does he make excuses, but then he blames the master, though. I mean, because he comes back, and what do we see is it's not like he says, I'm responsible. He blames the master. He says, it's not my fault. If you weren't this way, if you weren't so demanding, then maybe it wouldn't have been so hard for you. Maybe I wouldn't have been so afraid. And it's like that for all of us, isn't it? I mean, life is hard. How many of you guys feel like life is hard? Raise your hand. How many of you guys are busy? Raise your hand. Yeah. We all have these excuses if we wanted to, but I don't say that in a cliche manner. I know that you guys, you do. You have jobs. You're going to school. You have family obligations. We all have things to do. And my job is just as crazy as yours sometimes, right? I still have deadlines and things, and my life can be a bit hard at times. I have to pay bills too. I have to do everything that you do. We find ourselves a little bit overwhelmed sometimes. Let me tell you today, you're going to make it though. God actually believes in you. God believes in you right now today, no matter what your schedule is, no matter what you're going through, the master believes in you. God would say to you, I have assessed all things and I know, in fact, I created you just how you are to accomplish something. You have something special to give, each one of you. Don't be overwhelmed. You can do it. That's kind of what God's trusts you, and he's given you these talents and these opportunities in your life. So my prayer for us today is that we would begin to understand that God has confidence in us. Maybe God has more confidence in us than we have in ourselves. We're not called to live in a state of overwhelmed stuff all the time. God wants you to have peace in your life and understand who you are called to be. We are called to make a difference, not to make excuses. So do not allow excuses to hinder you from stepping into that place, because God believes you can do it. God totally believes that you can do this. And he wants to encourage you today. He's giving you strength and ability, and he's given you something of value. Something that an opportunity will come up and you will be able to meet that need, and God will bless somebody through your life. And at the heart of this parable, I think that's what we're talking about. We're talking about opportunities. These guys were all given an opportunity. Isn't that what the master is communicating here? I've entrusted you with this. I'm going to go away. It's up to you. You make your own choices, but we're going to see how you do. And he's saying, here's a chance for you to show yourself approved. Here's a chance to prove that you are capable and that you can do some things and you can bless people. Every single day, God gives us opportunities. Every single day, you will meet people or interact with people, and it's a chance to do something. I was talking to a friend of mine a number of years ago, and he had this dream for a number of years, and it was something he wanted to accomplish. And year after year went by, and after a good while, and I've known him for like 30 years, he said, it's been too long now. I wanted to do that, but I never got around to it. I never was able to do that. I've been living in a state of paralyzed comfortability. That's what he said. I'm just so comfortable where I am. I'm afraid to do anything different. I'm afraid to get out of my comfort zone and act. And that's so sad. That's raising the white flag. That's defeat. That's admitting defeat. And I just wonder if that's where that servant is here in the story. He's kind of paralyzed. He's afraid, right? I mean, it is fear. He even says that I was afraid. Because there's going to be an accounting, I was afraid. I wonder if many of us experience that same kind of thing. What if I can't do it? What if it doesn't work out the way I hoped? Well, guess what? That happens sometimes. When you fall down, what do? You get up and you dust yourself off and you just try again, right? Failure is only failure if it keeps you down. We see this in verse 25. He says he was afraid. How many of us are paralyzed by fear or enamored with our comfort that we're not willing to take a chance? That's kind of what's going on here. Fear can stop what God has planned for you in an instant. And if you don't do what God has called you to do, then it just won't get done, right? Because he's given each one of us something. And over and over and over again in Scripture, we're told, don't be afraid. It's the number one command in Scripture is do not fear. Do not be afraid. Fear is the opposite of what God wants to give you. In verse 26, the parable continues, and the master says, you wicked, lazy servant. So you knew that I harvest where I have not sown, and I gather where I have not scattered seed? Well, then you should have at least put my money on deposit with the banker, so that when I returned, I would have received it back with interest. Take the talent from him. This is what he says in judgment. Take the talent from him and give it to the one who has the 10 talents, the one who's doing really good, the one that's performing, the one who has proved that he can handle this kind of thing. To those who use well what they have, they will be given even more, and they will have an abundance. But for those who do nothing, even what little they have will be taken away. Now throw this useless servant into the outer darkness, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. I kind of like the way the Message paraphrase has this particular verse. It says, take the thousands that this guy did not put to use and give it to the one who actually risked the most, and then get rid of this play it safe guy who refuses to ever go out on a limb. But as I read that, I have to admit, those last verses in this parable, it kind of turns my understanding of God upside down in a way. And it is possible that we can go through life, we can have a perception of who God is, and then sometimes we find out that we really don't understand everything at all. But when I look at this with my limited view, and I'm just going to be honest, with my understanding as a human being, I don't think this guy should have been judged so harshly. I mean, I wonder about that. I mean, how horrible was it? How horrible what this guy did was it? I mean, you look at it here. He didn't go out and party. He didn't throw a big party like the wayward son, right? He didn't go out and blow it in Vegas or anything like that. He didn't buy a boat. He didn't spend it all recklessly or anything. He just didn't use it, right? He didn't pay off his mortgage and embezzle the money or anything like that. That's not what he did. What's up with this harsh judgment for that? I mean, he just didn't use it. Why is this such a harsh thing? And I wonder if that's a reflection of my thinking about how God might judge me someday. I'd like to think that I've missed opportunities, but maybe God will allow me to make mistakes and not judge me so harshly. I've often relate God to me in different ways. A lot of times I want judgment for other people, but I want grace for me. And I see this guy getting no grace. And it hurts. That harsh reality actually hurts. But then I read about how God calls for us to, conquer and to go and to lead his kingdom. He calls us to take hold of this world and work out our own salvation and change the world. He says, come and follow me, but let's get crazy and let's go out and actually spread the gospel and pursue righteousness and do what we can to change this world and make it a better place. It's actually a call to action. That's what it's all about. Not settling for inaction, which so many of us do. It's about action, not the inability to move from your comfort zone into a deeper place. The kingdom of God does not separate the haves and have-nots. It separates the do's and do-nots. Okay, it does. So when we look at this scripture and that strong reaction of the master, it communicates something to us, doesn't it? It says, stop living your life in a safe way. Be willing to take a chance. And we have to step out. If we're going to change our community here in Elizabeth City, folks, we're going to have to get out of our comfort zone and actually take a step out and go out and initiate the gospel and be a force to be reckoned with. That's what God has called us to do. Take the word of God into your daily existence, into your daily life, and look for opportunities to spread God's love. The question that we're left with after this story is this: what God-given talents have you buried? How many opportunities have you missed? And will you now invest them into the kingdom? Will you be willing to take a chance? This is something that the parables often end up with a confrontation, a question of conscience. Will you or will you not do this or do this? And some of us today, we need to get a shovel and go dig up those gifts and talents and get them out of the dirt. And maybe we've allowed them to lay dormant for a while, but we need to bring them out and be willing to use them for the glory of God. The way I like to think of it is like this. If you've ever seen, how many of you guys ever seen the movie Gladiator? Really bloody, gory movie, but I love it. One of the reasons I love it is there's a main character is a guy named General Maximus. And in one particular scene, they're putting their lives on the line. They may not live through this. And so Maximus, the great Roman general, he says, the things that we do in life echo into eternity. What we do in life echoes into eternity. And these are very powerfully true words, and they're indeed very factual. But the thing about it is, God actually said it first. If you look in Scripture, you'll find in Matthew chapter 6, God said the same thing. What you do with your life, using your gifts, your talents, your abilities, what you do with the things that God has blessed you with, those things will echo into eternity. They really, really will. So there are really two questions you have to answer for God. One is, did you trust on Christ to be your Savior? And the second question is, what did you do with your life after that moment? Okay, two questions God's going to ask. It's only a two-question test. Did you know Christ? Did you rely on Christ and trust Christ as your Savior and Lord? And number two, what did you do with your life after that moment? Did you invest? Did you take the gifts, talents, and abilities and use them? One question determines where you will spend eternity. The other question determines how you will spend eternity. Faithful in little, faithful in much. I invite you guys to be the church today. Be the church. Dig up those gifts, talents, and abilities. Find a way to plug in and use those to bless somebody, not just here on Sunday, but in your life. Be the hands and feet of Christ. We're going to